What do Dusty May, Curt Cignetti, and Cael Sanderson all have in common? They're all true coaches. Today, I break down what that means, and more importantly, what it means for the athletes in modern athletics. Today on The David Rutherford Show. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the show. I'm super fired up to have this one. Everybody who's ever played a sport at any level knows absolutely, hands down, the most important thing is how good is your coach. And as a person that's played Division I athletics, I played at Penn State lacrosse. I played football my whole life. I played basketball. I played baseball. I played soccer, you name it. I played it as a kid. As well as I've worked with a ton of D1 sports teams and professional teams. Last 2 years, I've worked with the Penn State athletic department. Last year with the Penn State men's hockey team. I've worked with the Penn State men's lacrosse team a bunch over the last 7 years. I've worked with the UPenn football team. I've worked with the Oregon State Beavers baseball team when they won a collegiate World Series championship. I've worked with professional teams like the Green Bay Packers. I've worked with the Carolina Panthers, and I won a World Series while working in support of the Boston Red Sox in 2018. So I've seen great coaching and I've seen horrible coaching. Not only that, my oldest daughter, who just committed to Penn State Harrisburg soccer, had played travel soccer for the last 8 years, and I watched just a continuous slew of horrific coaching, and I watch it at every level, almost in high school. That's the key of whether or not you're going to have a successful program. Do you have a true coach? Now, when I talk about true coach, what do I mean? Well, I believe a true coach has some basic fundamentals which makes them a true coach, and I'll get into that in a minute. But why am I digging into this today? Well, on this past Monday was the national championship basketball game, and we were able to watch Dusty May, the head coach of Michigan, in really only a second year there, win a national championship. Not only win it, but dominate the entire entire March Madness bracket. Right, in many cases, before the last game, winning by almost an average of 20 points the 4 previous games. Now that's a staggering level of performance for these college kids. Now, if you don't know the Dusty May story, it's fascinating because prior to University of Michigan, he was at our teeny little college here where I live in Boca Raton, Florida, called FAU, Florida Atlantic University, where he had a miracle season and took his team to the Final Four of the entire, Division I bracket. And that is no small feat. In fact, it's one of the most difficult feats that exists in all of college sports to be able to do that. Now, tangentially to this, I also just remember watching Curt Cignetti at the University of Indiana go in an undefeated season and win the NCAA Division I men's college football a tournament and bowl game, not bowl game, but the championship game there. And again, University of Indiana, not a powerhouse in the Big Ten, not even a powerhouse in Division I football, but he goes in, has a perfect season and wins that. Why? He's a true coach. And Cael Sanderson, the Penn State men's wrestling coach in his 13th national championship. I don't even know consecutively what it was. But what do all these coaches represent? They represent the ideal person that you want coaching you, right? That your coach or coaching your kid in college or whatever that looks like. They all seem to have these common traits about them. And in the modern game, obviously, we know with NIL, we know with agents, we know with the way recruiting practices work, the transfer portal. We know with kind of some of the other money that floats around out there. We've seen just some tremendous changes, even in the last 6 or 7 years with all of what's taking place. I think COVID was really kind of the year that broke college, Division I college apart in ways that we used to know it. Now, what are some of the pros of this? And I believe in a lot of these pros, right? There's fairer compensation for athletes, right? Now where, let's say, a place like Michigan, the famous Fab Five back in the day would make millions and millions of dollars, not only on these kids' name, image, and likenesses, their jerseys, all the different sports apparel and sneakers and all these deals that the school was, just having the windfall. These young kids, man, they couldn't even, they didn't have cars to drive. They couldn't live off campus. They didn't have extra money. I mean, meanwhile, the school's raking in millions, and that's been the case for many, 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 many years. And that's why it was always interest to me how certain schools would get away with it and other schools would not get away with it. And again, I think that's an example of how truly dysfunctional the NCAA has been over long stretches of time. The other aspects is, greater athlete agency and mobility, right? You can get recruited, come in, and if you aren't, you're not getting the right playing time, the college lied to you. And trust me, a lot of top recruits get lied. When I was working with University of Nebraska football team a few years ago, there was a young man who'd transferred over from Georgia, and he told me his whole recruiting thing on what they did and laying out the red carpet and the pressure they put on him and his family to get him in there. And then basically he sat, didn't even get a shot. And ultimately, the day before they were playing in a national championship game, his position coach came to him and said, you need to join the portal because you're essentially never going to play here. So that's the way kids are treated at these institutions as well, too. So, that greater athlete agency and mobility, their ability to not only combine that NIL with their ability to leave and go someplace that wants them. Hell, we look at Dusty May, and he had the young man, number 23, who got injured the last few games, but he had gone through, the portal a couple times. He came from 3 years at JUCO, transferred, and then transferred in again, finally finding his home with Coach May at the University of Michigan. All right. The other is an idea of improved talent retention, and product quality, right? Stars can stay at the college longer, earning the same money, that some people in professional can earn, right? Because remember, the number of students playing Division I is really minuscule. It's like, in many cases, less than 1% or right about 1 or 2% of total high school athletes playing in that talent pool, right? And for, D1 football, you might have a roster of 65 or whatever it is, or 90, or I forget what the new numbers are, down to where your basketball roster, which is very small, or your golf roster, or, lacrosse rosters or soccer rosters, right? That are all, much smaller than those bigger ones. So being able to get on a team, stay there, and succeed is there. Financial professional development opportunities, right? Branding, you can get branding deals. I remember I saw during the March Madness of those two players from Duke, the brothers, doing insurance ads or tax ads. I saw one of the UConn kids had a tax ad that he did during halftime. So, these kids are able to cash in on their talents, earn some money that they might not otherwise be able to leverage when they get to the pros. Because remember, you've coming at it even at D1 level, getting the pros even smaller than it was getting into college and more difficult. There's some broader benefits to these programs, right? There's more efficiency at rebuilding programs. And you've seen schools like Indiana and Michigan really benefit from that, being able to rebuild programs quickly when these better coaches come in. I just want to really talk about my incredible partnership with one of my best friends, and that's Evan Hafer and the boys over at Black Rifle Coffee. I'm so honored to be a part of their organization. And just really can't thank them enough for allowing me to participate. What I want you to do is go to blackriflecoffee.com, and I want to check out their new energy drinks. They have these incredible energy drinks that you can buy at all different kinds of stores, Walmart, Bass Sports, and others. Or you can go online and order. And if you want to put in your little promo code Froglogic20, there you get a little discount on stuff there. I highly recommend that. For me, it's my morning coffee. I am addicted to Black Rifle Coffee's Just Black. I think the Tiger Stripe camo definitely reels me in. The other one I love is the AK Espresso. This one right here is phenomenal. Love these, but they have so many different things that you can get at Black Rifle Coffee. You will love it. Again, when you go over blackriflecoffee.com and you're checking out, type in Froglogic20, get your little discount code, and tell them, oh, Ruddy Rut sent you. So to all those, folks out there who, love coffee like I do, please, do yourself a favor and go over and check out my brothers at BRCC. Oh, and we've got a cool event coming up that I'm going to be a part of. Out in Vegas. It's a staccato big shooting event with BRCC. So Jordy and I are going to go out and participate in that. We'll get some good footage and maybe a couple interviews. All right. Hoo-yah. All right. What are some of the cons, right? They have roster instability, which I hear is the number one thing, right? There's huge transfer rates. Thousands enter the portal annually in football alone, create a constant churn, which always impacts the team dynamics, right? The chemistry, right? If some kid believes he's better than he is and he's not getting playing time, he just leaves and goes to another and leaves and goes to another. I remember hearing some stories in football. There were kids that had been at 4 schools in 4 years now. And if I'm a coach and I'm looking at that, man, that's not the kid that I want on my team, right? If you have the revolving door, it's going to have a negative impact. Widening competitive and financial inequality, right? In the wealthy power conference schools, right? You have, a ton of money going in there. $20 million or so baseline. And then you can get these other deals from whatever. But I'm telling you what, the third string guard, right? In football, or, the fourth string long pull defensive men on your lacrosse team, they're not getting paid and they're not getting endorsement deals. And kind of that causes another problem internally. Obviously academic disruption, frequent transfers, can often result in the loss of credits, school credits, which delays graduations, has an impact or a reduction of focus on education, which ultimately, right, most of the kids that are going to play D1 sports are not going to the pros, are not going to become superstars, are not going to be making millions. And so education is at the essence of why you're going to college in the first place. And yeah, you can play D1 and have a great career and be able to, take that experience with you and leverage it in whatever way you can leverage it down in the future. Hell, man, wasn't particularly great at it in school. I didn't see the field barely at all. But the experience alone has given me a core understanding of performance and what it means to participate at that level, and what it takes to succeed and to thrive, which I wasn't able to do. Thankfully my time in the teams taught me more. And as I've gotten older, really understanding performance from my own experiences and mostly research and working with athletes at all these different levels, from high school to college to pros. I think there's a whole level of the NIL stuff that has a really negative connotation. Understanding taxes, I've heard some stories about kids getting sued for breach of contact, right? Imagine you got a big donor who really comes out of the pocket to get this kid in, and the kid just essentially shows up, doesn't integrate well, and then bolts after that. And the donor's like, what the hell? How did I just spend $500,000 on this kid and he's gone, before the season's even out? What's that going to do to your donor pool as well, that you can't get control or can keep that kid happy with where he's at? And then finally, this is the more subjective one. It's that erosion of tradition or the amateur spirit, right? The school loyalty, your pride for playing at your school, right? These organic rivalries between big conference teams, the Ohio State, Michigan, right? The Oregon, whomever, right? Whatever it is, these big loyal, those kind of lose it because kids are just kind of navigating their way to a paycheck and to starting, so they can leverage that and to get paid, essentially. And essentially it turns many of your college athletes into semi-pros, and what that means for them psychologically, because I've actually done work with certain pro teams. Like, how do you prepare the kid for if he doesn't succeed at that high level and then he only has a short career? Right? Most people, don't realize just how short careers can be through injury, through just not rising to the occasion and making the next level jump in terms of your abilities, right? And then the pressures of just what it means to have to perform at that level. I mean, walking into the University of Michigan's arena or walking into, their stadium or whatever it might be, and you've got 100,000 people booing you because you have a bad game. That's a tremendous amount of pressure on a 18 to 22-year-old kid, right? So all of these things play a role. And what I think the reality is we have to start thinking about is the role that the coach plays and what that coach means. Now, I remember growing up in the day where you had, the Don Shulas, the Bear Bryants, the Bo Schembechlers, the Krzyzewskis, the Bobby Knights, all these storied old school coaches who were able to really, take these young kids. John Wooden, probably one of my favorite coaches of all time, right? And that pyramid of performance that he came up with, which is a great understanding of some of what I'm going to talk about in terms of that true coach. And so one of the things that it's really critical and for players and coaches to think about what are my personal responsibilities? And if I'm a kid, what I want to look for is I want to look for that true coach, the coach who has kind of the understanding, right? Remember, and also you think about this, right? Being a coach in the modern era, man, it's almost like you're running a major multi-million-dollar business, right? And it's not like, you're doing with seasoned professionals. You're working with kids. You're working with kids that have come from different backgrounds, socioeconomic backgrounds, different moral backgrounds, different upbringings, different focuses, different whatever. And you're having them integrate into this intensely rigorous schedule. You got to figure most D1 athletic programs, that's a 30 to 40 hour week in addition to your scholastic requirements as well too. So, maintaining the understanding. Plus the coach has to deal with the athletic department and the ADs, has to deal with the press constantly, what they're doing, how they're hammering their kids. I mean, we saw the head coach of the UConn women's team really go off on the NCAA and the amount of pressure they were putting on these young girls in terms of meeting media requirements and outside practices where media can be there, right? All of this plays a role in those pressures on what it means to be a true coach. So, I think one of the things that coaches are most specifically responsible for, right, is first and foremost is the ability to develop the individual kid. And not just develop that kid as an athlete, but to develop them as a human being, to develop them as a person that can take this unbelievably, this great gift of college athletics and parlay that into a confidence, right? An ability to embrace their fear, where they can then take that experience, leverage it, and go pursue something that's meaningful, right? That has genuine purpose in their life. And that is, they can continue to integrate in all different kinds of teams, whatever profession they choose, or, whatever sense of meaning they pursue in their lives, whether they get into to stay in athletics, or they get into entrepreneurialism, or they get into teaching, or whatever career they pursue. Right. That's the fundamental responsibility for a coach. And so anytime I work with coaches, that's one of the first places I start with. I want to understand what your coaching philosophy is behind the development of the human being. And I definitely, now knowing that Chloe's going to commit to going and playing up here, my oldest kid, and I'm going to be like, coach, what are you going to, I just want to understand what's your mission for my daughter and her development, not only as a player, but more importantly, as a human being, to take this experience and leverage it in her life, right? So that core coaching philosophy is critical. Now, I know for a fact that many coaches don't even have a coaching philosophy. Right? They might have some type of training regimen and kind of an approach to games maybe, but really the core philosophy of why they're coaching and what they want to achieve within the human being that they have under their care and responsibility. That's first and foremost. The other is how coaches assemble, right? How they recruit, how they take these unique, driven young people and they bring them together under the construct of this core mission, which should be to, yes, absolutely win. That should be at the forefront of why anybody competes in the first place. If you don't want to win, then, you should go do it, off to the side in some rec league or whatever it is. But one of the most, I would say, 95% of all athletes that I've ever been around or worked with or myself, the fundamental reason why you do is for the competition. And the root of the competition is to succeed, which is to win, which is then to drive forward this collective mission of performance, right? Right? Where everybody recognizes that your individual drive and commitment and performance is relative to the person who's on the right and left you, even if you're playing an individual sport, even if you're wrestling, right? The culture of Cael Sanderson's Penn State men's team is the essence of what makes them so fundamentally good, right? And how they do that every day in practice and out of season and how they recruit people for their team. And I find it really interesting that they had one transfer in this year, a kid from Oklahoma, but otherwise, Cael really specifically focuses on recruiting out of high school, bringing them in, the redshirt concept, and then developing these kids as performers in their weight class, but in an overall structure of what Penn State wrestling is trying to teach these kids to become champions. And in my opinion, nobody's ever done it as good as Cael. I think it's probably the most elite college Division I sports program I've ever seen in my entire life. Now, there have been great programs in the past, and to keep those going is often challenging. But again, it comes back to these core ideas of what it means to be a true coach, right? That coaching philosophy, recruiting the right kids, the development of those kids, and really getting them focused on that common mission, right? Now, one of the things that I think must be difficult as you're out there assessing the landscape of great high school players or transfer portal players is you look at their natural athletic talent. Obviously, right, that is a key indicator of what that kid's going to be able to produce when they're on the field, the court, or where on the mats, wherever it might be. And so you look at those baseline fundamentals of talent, how fast they are, how much energy can they generate, how strong they are, how fast they can recover, their work ethic, right? Their idea of fundamental skills, how competent they are in those fundamentals, how they integrate in, their field IQ, if you will. All these things are evaluating traits. And I'll never forget my good friend, Mike Rickard, who is the head of scouting at the Red Sox. They used to have a very specific scout, what they look for, these 6 things. But Mike always talked about the X factor too. And that X factor is, in my opinion, the core of it, what a true coach looks for. The X factor is that social integration, right? The ability for that kid, no matter how good they are on that status poll, right? Can they integrate into the overall population of what that team is? Because the team dynamics are what make it. I remember, just watching another guy that I had a short amount of time working with a few years ago at Carolina, and that's Sam Donaldson, who ended up winning the Super Bowl for Seattle this year. And, one of the things he commented on when he was being interviewed was just how committed the team was. It was the guys in the locker room, the coach's commitment to the guys, and really their commitment. And his praise of the defense was also immaculate, the other side of the ball from him and what the impact they had. Right. And so it's that selflessness of the player to recognize it's always a team approach to comprehensive victory. Now, as you look at all those things, right, and you look about these fundamentals, I evaluate players from a different performance, right? I'm not going to go in there and coach a kid how to hit a soccer ball better, or coach a kid how to shoot a lacrosse ball, or coach a kid how to throw a football. That's way outside. Plus, modern training techniques are so advanced and so good and so awesome that, I'm just out of my league. But what I do understand, right, is I understand that mental, emotional, spiritual intersection, right? What you're trying to accomplish with these kids, right? And so fundamentals for me are always integrated around 2 main components, and that's fear, right? When you're a young kid and you're showing up to, let's call it Indiana, this spring ball, or in the fall, or, leading into the fall ball, imagine the fear you have of stepping onto a national championship team where the expectations now are, to get there again, because you've done it, you've gotten there, or at least to get back to the playoffs and perform well and have a winning season. Like, that's the expectation. And so it's inevitable that you're going to put a heightened pressure upon yourself, which generates fear, right? And fear's healthy. Fear's good. And again, there's no such thing as fearlessness. Everybody has fear. I don't care whatever level you're at. Even the, McDonald's first team, or not at McDonald's, but Nike first team all-star basketball kid is going to have fear, right? And that's what drives them. And, one of the most impressive young people I've ever seen manage that fear. And then the other component is self-confidence. I'll talk about that, is Cooper Flagg last year at Duke, right? And then coming from Duke and going to the Dallas Mavericks. And he's already had multiple 50-point games as a 19-year-old kid in the NBA, which, again, he's a super freak, right? So he's the outer edge of performance. But most normal kids, right, the greater body of the bell curve, they're going to have fear. So as a coach, it's your responsibility to help teach these kids how to embrace those things, right? And they're going to be afraid of not playing. They're going to be afraid of making mistakes. They're going to be afraid of not integrating, not being accepted by the team, not being able to keep up with their schoolwork, all these very common natural fears. And so, addressing those commonalities across your team is an essential to give them the support structure to make sure you can mitigate those fears, reduce them, or just say, hey, listen, it's cool to be afraid, but listen, you need to step into the options that we provide you to help mitigate or lessen the amount of fear you're dealing with every day. And most great programs out there, they have mental skills coaches, they have psychologists on staff, right? All these people to help and support these kids with the pressure that they're dealing with. Now, the other aspect is self-confidence, right? And that's really key when it comes to athletic performance, right? Self-confidence is, in my opinion, is pretty basic, right? The biggest indicator of self-confident kids are the kids that are having fun, the kids that love to put the work in, the kids that are grinding, the kids that are doing the work when nobody's listening, right? The off practices, what they're hitting the weight room, the stretching, they're managing their diets, they're not getting hammered all the time, right? They're enjoying themselves, but they're really committed to this experience of playing at that D1 or D3 level, whatever level it might be. And self-confidence is something that can get eradicated or knocked down every single day, right? You come in, have a bad practice, boom, your self-confidence is destroyed. You're back down to zero. You go into the game, you call a bad timeout, you miss a critical shot, you get a foul called on you that costs you the game. All of that is a reality of performance. Your failures are going to be a huge part of that. And so when people fail, their self-confidence gets knocked down. Great coaches are testing that day in and day out, right? They're imposing failure in those practice sessions because they're knocking these kids down. But then what they're doing is they're not destroying them when they're down. They're not putting their boot on their necks and humiliating them emotionally, spiritually, and mentally. They're picking them back up, coaching them specific on fundamentals, what they did wrong, and then they're giving them an opportunity to get back in and correct the mistake they did, right? And they keep doing that over and over and over. That's what true coaches do. They're constantly forcing that self-confidence to be checked so then the kid can come back and rehabilitate with their assistance through better fundamental performance and team integration, right? Self-confidence is a key thing. The other aspect about self-confidence that I see all the time with kids is the comparative analysis of others, right? You're always seeing kids compare themselves. Now, don't get me wrong. I truly believe the old chip on a shoulder. Oh, if that kid's good, I'm going to go beat him. I'm going to outscore him. I'm going to go perform better. That's the driver. I know that works. I've used it myself in the past. And it is a useful tool to rehabilitate self-confidence, but it also can have negative effects as well, too. A true coach will see that, try and mitigate that, and say, listen, stop comparing yourself to other people. Be your own player. Be your own player in relationship to the players that are around you, because their performance can enhance your performance. And so if you're conscientious of their fragility, the fragility of their self-confidence, and are constantly supporting them, not babying or wrongfully self-grandizing other people, but really hitting them with truth and with fundamental support and lifting people up when they're down, man, that's the essence of strong bonds on a team, right? If one guy suffers, everyone should suffer in some capacity, not as much as the individual, but certainly the recognition that, hey, this player who plays a critical aspect of our team is struggling. Let's support him and build him back. Not in a Pollyannic way, but in a maybe tough love way or whatever it might be, whatever the culture of the team is. So that's huge. Now, once you adapt to those fundamentals of really helping kids deal with fear, right, embrace their fears and the natural transitions they're going through and the growth as players and performers, and then also being able to have a real distinct program to rehabilitate self-confidence after they get knocked down. Now, the advanced concepts in this are fundamentally this, right? You want to have a kid that's really focused on team orientation, right? And we saw that, right? I remember listening to those young men after Indiana when they won, or listening to Michigan, or you listening to those kids at Penn State. You listen to the UCLA women's head coach who just won. You listen to some of these other teams that have won national championships, hockey teams, fencing teams, track and field, right? The great praise comes from the acknowledgement that, hey, we all operate as a team. And don't get me wrong, I know a lot of these are sound bites for the cameras. They're, the old Bull Durham for you older folks, where he's teaching LaRouche how to not be dumb when you're getting interviewed by, when you're getting interviewed by the media, right? To say something that's clever and works. But what I see is this really unique aspect in athletics out there right now, which is this team orientation, to give props where props are due, the recognition you don't get there on your own. Because those kids who think that way, they're always going to be a cancer on your team. And that's really what you don't want unless you're a true coach, which I believe can take that superstar, that individual, break them down and have them integrate into the team culture, because team orientation is everything, right? And what I believe team orientation focuses on is the kid committed to the team and to the teammates, to the program, right? Not just committed to them seeing playing time, but committed to the program itself, committed to the way the coaching staff aggregates the flow, the development of the individual, development of the team, right? That's huge. The other is their training mindset. If a kid is fundamentally committed to training and doesn't skimp on reps and goes all in, puts and follows the training procedure and buys into that program, that's a kid who's really going to be integrated into the team orientation, or the team life, I call it, right? And then after that, you have great communicators. Great teammates are great communicators. They're always relaying information to each other. They're keeping each other abreast of what's going on. If you go to the kid and like, hey man, did you watch game films? Nah, man, I don't need to watch that. I got my game. I'm good. Well, that's not what you want. You want somebody who's willing to do the work, to communicate back and forth coaches and for the players they're playing with or competing with in and around their sport, right? And lastly, leadership. What I always think true coaches are looking to do is they're looking to take these exceptional young athletes, bring them in, and then develop them as true leaders for the team. And if you see those kids willfully moving into those leadership roles, whatever they might be, a leadership role as a bench player, leadership role as a practice player, leadership role as a starter, right? That's essential. You have to have kids that want to take up that pressure, take up that rucksack of leadership and develop that alone. So what does that take? It takes them to communicating and coming to the coach, what do I need to learn how to do in order to be a great leader? And that leadership structure should fall within the coaching purview, as well as coaching development, as well as the culture of the team. Now, I will tell you this, many teams I've worked with do not have that leadership development program built in. And what I believe true coaches do, they think about that from the start, because it's your leaders of the team that are going to be able to correct many issues that the coaches don't necessarily need to get involved in. That's why it's essential to have a great leadership development program internal as a coach. You want these players to be able to govern themselves at a pretty high level, right? To police up the effort, to keep everybody focused on the philosophical mandates presented by the true coach, as well as the regimen of performance required for stepping on that court. All right. The last one, right, is this sense of purpose, right? To live with purpose on the team. And that purpose is to play the sport at the highest level possible, right? To really explore what your capabilities are instead of allowing your emotions or that spiritual doubt that comes into play distract you from what you potentially could become, because that negative insurgency is in your head. So getting a true coach will really drill that down in a realistic manner with each player, each kid on their team, right? What's your purpose of being here? What's your objective in your 4 or 5 years you're going to be playing, right? What's your objective in the next week of practice, in the next hour? What's your purpose today, right? And these are the questions that need to be presented, something much more deep, much more profound for these young kids. Get their brains thinking on that level, because before you know it, their career's over and they're never playing a sport again. And that identity shift, if they don't have genuine purpose about what their expectations, what the intent of their commitment to playing the sport is going to result when they're getting out or they're done playing, if you don't have that built into that kid, those kids can really suffer pretty substantially from going from an athlete from 4 years old to at 22 years old, your life is over and you have no idea what your identity is next. And I know that, and vividly from happening to me multiple different times. So a true coach will integrate that genuine sense of purpose in the kid and help them discover that in real time. All right. Now, the last component of that purpose that you really have to ask yourself if you're the coach is, right, does my student athlete, does my athlete understand what I want his impact to be daily, both on the practice field as well as on the game field, right? That intention. What impact do I need from you, son, or what impact do I need you from a female athlete? Hey, listen, what's your intent every day as part of this team? And then to hold them accountable for that intent, the impact of their play, of their commitment to the culture, right? The other is, how are they influencing other teammates around them? That's a big one. What tools do they use? If you're going to have leaders emerge on your team, what tools is that kid? Because many times these kids have no idea. Every time I ask a young player, hey, what are the 3 top things you need to do to be a leader on the team? Everyone nails the first one. My play will mandate whether or not people respect me, so I lead on my own performance. Great, that's fine and dandy. But when you're off the field and you're leading in practice and someone's distracted, someone's got shit going on in their personal lives, they're not eating right, they're drinking or whatever, what are the tools you're going to use to influence that kid to bring them back so they don't lose sight of the profound opportunity they have to be a part of the program, right? What are your influential tools? And the last one is to really begin to give these kids a contemplation of what do you want your legacy to be? Not just with the team itself, the culture of the community. And I saw this really phenomenal thing with the new head coach at Penn State football. Campbell just brought back 3 players that I remember when I was there who were profound, right? Keyjana Carter, who I'm friends with, Kyle Brady, and their tight end who came back. I'm sorry, I'm forgetting his name right now, but these guys were very powerful, and they brought him back this past week to influence the younger players, to talk about the tradition and the heritage of the legacy that they hope keeps going on at Penn State football. So get these young kids to start thinking about that legacy that they're going to have, not just during, once they're first done, but as down in the future, right? When you become a part of a team, that's a big deal. And you play a major role on how that team's going to be remembered for long term. And as we all know, there are these times in history where certain teams were better than others. And you always go back to these eras of certain performances of these great teams in history. And you think about it. And what ultimately I always see when we look back to the profound eras during different college sports teams, you find yourself a true coach integrated in every one of those profound great eras. All right. So, I wanted to shift it up from typical politics, the war in Iran, operators, all the other stuff I've been doing, because if you do or do not know, obviously performance is a passion for me. I love teaching. I do this in my day job every day. I work with some of the top business people in the country regularly. I still am available to work with different athletes and sports teams at every level and coaching them to really try and understand how they can maximize their experience and really move into that role where a true coach will seek them out, develop them, and they will have this profound legacy of the impact of what they've done. If you want to know more about me and some of my coaching, go visit davidrutherford.com. Check out the online training coaching. A lot of those principles I talked about here are available there on an individual level. If you're also interested in me working with your team, collegiately or professionally, don't hesitate to reach out. Also on davidrutherford.com. And if you know a coach out there who could listen to this or needs to listen, don't be afraid to share this. Leave a comment if I missed something or whatever. We just can't thank you enough for all of your support. I truly believe and love coaching and what it has and the impact, long-lasting impact it has, not only on these young athletes, but also on their parents, on their family members, and on the coaching staff that they get to participate with. So that's all I got. Hoo-yah. You can follow us on any social media platform at David Rutherford Show or on X at D Rutherford Show. You can follow me at Team Froglogic on both X and Instagram. All right, everybody. Many thanks to my great coaches I've had in the past. Many thanks to the Lord Almighty, and many thanks to you. God bless you. Hoo-yah.